I stepped into the sagging porch light of my childhood home and saw Sabrina hunched over the kitchen table, sorting nickels like a casino dealer. A dented formula can sat open, half empty. When she looked up, there was a smile I didn't recognize, the kind someone wears right before they take something that isn't theirs. By sunrise, I'd learned the baby food crisis was a script. The house wasn't legally ours, and my name had been forged on a line that could erase 3 decades of my life. My name is Isa Miller. I'm 33 years old, and I optimize supply chains for a living. In Austin, my life is a series of clean data points and predictable outcomes. I build systems to prevent failure, which is why I was driving a rented sedan through 3 states on 0 sleep, heading toward the one system I could never fix, my family. The call had come from Mrs. Older, our old neighbor. Her voice was a ready whisper over the line. "Isa, honey, I don't want to alarm you, but the lights have been on at your parents' place for 3 nights, and there's a man." "Well, I just thought you should know." The house in Maple Hollow was supposed to be empty, locked, a silent asset waiting for probate to crawl its way to a conclusion. Mom Eileen was safe in her senior apartment, and my sister Sabrina was well. Sabrina was wherever her latest crisis had landed her. I pulled onto our street at just after 2 o'clock in the morning. The air, even in late spring, was thick with the Rust Belt smell of damp earth and dying industry. The house looked smaller, meaner, leaning slightly to the left as if exhausted, and just as Mrs. Older said. A single weak yellow light glowed from the kitchen window, cutting a pathetic square into the dark. I stepped into that sagging porch light, the one that flickered like a dying heartbeat, and used the key I'd had since high school. It stuck, as it always did, forcing me to jiggle it hard, a familiar frustration. The door swung open on a groan, scraping the warped floorboard inside, and there was the scene that would tear the next week of my life apart. I saw Sabrina hunched over the kitchen table, sorting nickels, dimes, and quarters into meticulous, desperate stacks. She looked up, startled, and the face that met mine wasn't my sister's. Not really. It was a mask of frantic performance. A dented formula can, the generic brand, sat open by her elbow, half empty. "Sabrina, what the hell is going on?" "Isa." Her voice was rough. She tried for a smile, but it was a grimace. "God, you scared me." Older called. She said there were lights. I walked in, letting my bag drop by the door, my eyes doing what they were trained to do, scan, assess, identify anomalies. The house itself was the first anomaly. It didn't just feel empty, it felt rotting. The air was sour. The door frame to the dining room visibly tilted. A structural wound left to fester. The old regulator clock on the wall, the one Dad used to obsessively wind, was ticking, but the sound was frantic. I glanced at my watch. The clock was exactly 5 minutes fast. A small, persistent lie. On that same wall, the big framed photo of our late dad at the lake was still there, but the bottom right corner, where he'd been holding Mom's hand, had been ripped, leaving a jagged white scar. Sabrina saw me looking. "It's damp in here," she muttered, gesturing to the coins. They shut the power off. I was scraping together enough for Ivy's formula. They won't take a card for a partial payment. Can you believe that? They need cash. My gaze dropped from her face to the table. Beneath the scattered piles of change, mostly hidden by her forearm, was a pale blue ledger, the old-fashioned kind with marbled edges. As my eyes focused on it, Sabrina's hand moved as fast as a snake, slapping the ledger shut and pulling it into her lap. Just bills, she said. Too quickly. I ignored it for a second, my mind logging it. Anomaly, one concealed ledger. I walked past her into the living room. The air was colder here. Stacked against the far wall were 3 large moving boxes, the tops folded shut. Someone had scrolled on the side of each one in thick black marker, * Mom's papers. Do not touch. *. This was wrong. Mom Eileen had moved into her apartment 6 months ago. I had moved her myself. We'd sorted her papers then, we'd shredded, filed, and stored. These boxes had no reason to be here. Anomaly 2, staged boxes. Why are Mom's things here, Sabrina? She followed me, wringing her hands. The coin-counting martyr was gone, replaced by the desperate victim. ISA, please don't be mad. Troy and I, we hit a rough patch. A really rough patch. We just needed a place to stay for a little while, just until we get back on our feet. The plea was rehearsed. I could hear the cadence, the practiced pause. Back on your feet. From what? And who's Troy? He's Ivy's father. He's trying, ISA, he really is. It's just this town. There's no work. We just needed a soft place to land. This isn't a soft place, Sabrina. This house isn't yours to use. My eyes continued their inventory, the mantle, the dusty knickknacks, and then anomaly 3. Hanging from the brass hook where Dad used to keep his car keys was a new set. They were attached to a bright blue realtor lanyard, the plastic-coated kind they give out at open houses. A small white tag was attached to the keyring. My stomach tightened. I didn't even have to step closer to read the crisp professional logo embossed on it, Hearth Realty. Why do you have keys from a realtor, Sabrina? She froze. Oh, it's nothing. I was inquiring about appraisals, you know, for when we finally sell. Just getting information. The house was never listed, I said, my voice flat. And then, as if on cue, a sound from the hallway, a sharp crackle of static, followed by the soft, unmistakable coo of an infant. A baby monitor. Sabrina's shoulders slumped. This time with genuine weariness. She's in our old room, Ivy. She's everything, ISA. The sound disarmed me, just for a beat. The house could rot. The money could vanish. Sabrina could lie. But a baby was a baby. It was the one clean data point in the entire equation. I felt the knot in my chest loosen, just a fraction. I wouldn't fight my sister in front of her child. There will be no harm, no shouting, only soft coos. I softened, but I didn't stand down. My alert status remained high. Sabrina, I started, trying to keep my voice reasonable. You can't be here. We have a probate process. You can't just squat in the estate. It's not squatting if it's family, she snapped, and then her face crumpled. Please, ISA, just for a few days. I'm begging you. If you love family, you'll say yes. That line landed like a brick. It was too polished, too clean. It wasn't a desperate plea, it was a rehearsed test. She was probing my defenses, looking for the guilt-based password that would grant her access. I turned away from her, looking down the dark hallway toward our old bedrooms, toward the study, Dad's study. The door was closed. But something was wrong with it. The old brass knob was gone. In its place, gleaming in the dim hallway light, was a new keypad deadbolt, a sleek brushed nickel model. I walked toward it, my sneakers silent on the dusty runner. Who put this here? Sabrina didn't move. Oh, Mom did, ages ago. She kept losing the key. A lie. A stupid, clumsy lie. Mom hadn't been here in months. And more importantly, no one had money for repairs. The porch was sagging. The paint was peeling. The door frames were warped. But someone had spent $150 on a digital lock for a room full of dusty books. Anomaly 4, the unfunded high security lock. I had everything I needed. I turned back to Sabrina, who was watching me, her eyes wide, the perfect picture of beleaguered motherhood. I'm exhausted, I said, which was true. I drove 10 hours. I'm sleeping on the couch. Relief flooded her face. It was so obvious, so complete, that it felt like a confession. She thought she'd won. She thought the performance had worked, that the baby and the tears had bought her more time. Of course, I say. Thank you. Thank you. I'll get you blankets. Don't, I said. I'll get them. I waited until I heard her go back into the bedroom, until I heard the quiet murmur of her voice comforting the baby. Then I pulled my phone from my back pocket. I opened a new text message addressed to myself. My fingers flew across the screen, the habit of a decade in operation strategy taking over. My job is to find the weak points in a system before they break. And this was a system in critical failure. I typed, item, S at kitchen table, coin of formula performance. Item, pale blue ledger, actively concealed. Item, living room boxes, mom's papers, false premise. Item, new keypad deadbolt on study, unfunded, contradicts no money. Item, hearth anchor realty keys on mantle, house not listed. Item, rehearsed line, if you love family, you'll say yes. Asterisk. I hit send. In Austin, I won boardroom fights by having a better ledger, by logging the anomalies no one else saw. Tonight, I wasn't fighting for a quarterly projection. I was fighting for my father's house, and I was going to use the exact same methods. I lay perfectly still on the lumpy sofa, listening to the house settle. The blanket Sabrina had given me smelled of cedar and mildew, a scent so specific to this house it felt like a violation to have her here, faking poverty under its roof. The only sounds were the frantic, accelerated ticking of the clock, 5 minutes fast, always 5 minutes fast, and the occasional static lace sigh from the baby monitor Sabrina had placed on the coffee table. My eyes were wide open in the dark, staring at the geography of water stains on the ceiling. My father would have hated this. He would have hated the warped door frames, the ripped photograph, and most of all, the lies. Dad lived by a single, immovable rule, a mantra he drilled into me since I was old enough to read. Paper first, promises second, he'd say, tapping the thick, filed deed to this very house. He wasn't a cold man, but he was a precise one. He believed emotions were weather, but a contract was bedrock. He taught me diligence. He had me balancing his checkbook when I was 15 years old, demanding I account for every penny. When I took out my first car loan, he sat with me at the kitchen table, this same table, minus the desperate piles of coins, and read every line of the financing agreement aloud, explaining amortization schedules until my eyes glazed over. Sabrina, meanwhile, learned a different currency. She preferred charm over contracts. She could cry her way out of a speeding ticket, smile her way into an extension on rent, and borrow $20 with a heartbreaking story that made you feel grateful to be helping her. Dad loved her for her fire, her spontaneity, but he trusted me with the paperwork. That fundamental difference was the fault line running straight through our lives, and tonight, it felt like an earthquake. Now, Dad was gone, and the paperwork was a disaster. After his passing, the probate process had slammed to a halt. His will was simple enough, splitting his assets 50-50ths between us, but it referenced a document no one could locate, the Home Covenant Addendum. Our lawyer was stumped without it. The title to the house was clouded, unsellable, unmovable. We were stuck, and the house sat in limbo. Into that vacuum of grief and confusion stepped Sabrina. Mom, rattling around the empty rooms, lonely and completely overwhelmed by the bureaucracy of death, was easy prey. I'll handle the house, Mom, Sabrina had cooed with manufactured competence. Just let me hold the keys. Keep an eye on things. Mom, desperate for relief, had signed what she thought was a simple authorization. I'd reviewed it via email from Austin, a short-term caretaker agreement. It was specific language I'd insisted on. It granted Sabrina access to hold keys and oversee necessary maintenance pending the probate resolution. I'd made sure the lawyer added the final clause, which Mom agreed was smart. This agreement does not establish residency or tenancy. Sabrina had signed it. Overseeing maintenance was a bitter joke. I was the one overseeing it from 800 miles away. I was the one funding the taxes each year, paying the homeowner's insurance, keeping the utilities on, ironically, so the pipes wouldn't burst. I routed every single payment through a dedicated escrow account at Quarry Finch Bank, just so the paper trail would be clean, just as Dad would have demanded. I'd ask Sabrina for the utility invoices so I could pay them directly. Twice, she'd claimed she lost the receipts for the water bill. "Sorry, sis," she texted, adding a string of crying emojis. Total brain fog. They sent a shut-off notice. I'd had to call the county and pay the late fees myself. Now, seeing that gleaming keypad lock on the study door, I realized her brain fog was surgically precise. The baby monitor crackled again. A soft sigh, then quiet. Ivy. That sound meant he was likely here. Two asleep in one of the back rooms, Troy Maddox, Sabrina's ex, or perhaps her current co-conspirator. With them, the line was always blurred. I'd only met him once, and it was enough. It was at Dad's funeral. Troy, a smooth talker in a polyester suit that was too tight in the shoulders, smelling faintly of stale beer and overpowering cologne. While I was trying to hold Mom upright as the casket was lowered, he'd pulled me aside by the catering table, his face a mask of practiced sympathy. "A terrible loss, ISA. Your dad was a great man, a pillar." He'd waited just long enough for the sentiment to land, then leaned in. "You know, with the market the way it is, you guys are sitting on a ton of equity here. A simple cash-out refinance pulls some of that inheritance out now. I know a guy. At my father's funeral, he was pitching a predatory loan. I told him exactly where he could file his financial advice. He'd actually laughed. A short, barking sound, as if I were the one being rude. He was the man Mrs. Older had seen. He was the reason for the keypad lock. I hated him for bringing his toxic ambition into this space. This house wasn't an asset, it wasn't equity. It was the physical record of our childhood. I turned my head, looking across the dark living room at the wide window near the fireplace. I could just make out the row of tiny parallel nail holes in the wooden trim just below the sill. That's where Dad hung the Christmas garlands every single year, meticulously measuring the space, refusing to use tape or adhesive junk. In the pantry, a sliver of wall by the door was covered in pencil marks, a chaotic ladder of our growth chart. Asterisk ISA, age 8. Asterisk Sabrina, age 13, caught up. Asterisk this was our legacy, not just decor. The stakes weren't the resale value, they were the memories etched into the drywall. And Troy Maddox was treating it like a teardown. I closed my eyes, the smell of mildew and Sabrina's cold coffee filling my lungs. This was Maple Hollow. Back in Austin, I lived in a glass and steel Westlake apartment. I had a rising career. I managed multi-million-dollar logistics budgets for a tech firm. I optimized systems. Here, the main street was lined with boarded-up shops and faded for-lease signs. The biggest employer, a plastics factory, had moved its operations south 2 years ago, gutting the town and leaving a vacuum. Guilt is just a weather pattern in Maple Hollow. It rolls in every time you drive past the city limits. Sabrina knew how to harness that weather. She knew how to weaponize my success against me, my clean apartment versus her chaos, my salary versus her coin-counting performance. She was counting on that guilt to blind me. The cooing from the monitor started again, this time escalating toward a thin, ready cry. I heard Sabrina's muffled voice from the back bedroom, "Sure, baby, it's okay. Mommy's here." And then the familiar, rhythmic creak of the old wooden rocking chair. The crying softened, then stopped. Ivy, the one innocent party, the one clean data point in this entire mess. That baby was the only topic that disarmed everyone. I knew, even as my anger simmered hot and low in my stomach, that I would never, ever weaponize that child. I wouldn't use her as leverage. I wouldn't threaten Sabrina's custody. I wouldn't even bring her up in a legal filing if I could possibly help it. The fight was about the house. The forgery I suspected. The lies. The baby was off limits. That was my line in the sand, the one I wouldn't cross. Sabrina might use her child as a shield, but I would not treat her as a target. I pulled my phone out from under the scratchy Afghan. Cupping my hand over the screen to dim the light to its lowest setting, I found Mrs. Alder's number and opened my voicemail. Pressing the phone tight to my ear, the volume barely audible, I replayed the message that had sent me scrambling across 3 states on caffeine and adrenaline. Her voice was thin, worried. "ISA, honey, it's Helen Alder. Now, I don't want to alarm you, but the lights have been on for days, and I saw men with clipboards last week." She paused, and I could hear her inhale. They were pointing at the roof and the foundation, talking loud about easements. "Honey, your family home might be up for, I just can't say over the phone. You just call me when you get this." Men with clipboards, Hearth Anchor Realty, the keypad lock, the hidden blue ledger, the staged boxes of mom's papers, the coin-counting script. These weren't the actions of a sister needing a soft place to land. These were the calculated steps of a con. My mission, which I'd vaguely defined in my head as a comfort visit or damage control, had shifted. This was now a forensic walkthrough. This was an audit. I would do it with love. Yes, I would protect my niece, but I would do it with ledgers. I sat up slowly, the ancient couch springs groaning in protest. In the back room, the rocking chair stopped. The house was silent again, save for that lying clock. I needed to see inside that locked study. I needed to find the home covenant addendum that my father, the man who believed in paper above all else, would never have lost. I looked at the keypad lock, a dark, menacing rectangle of judgment in the hallway. My father taught me diligence. Sabrina relied on charm. Charm just met its match. I didn't sleep. I lay on that couch, every spring digging into my spine, and just listened. I listened to the house breathe its sour, damp air. I listened to the lie of the clock ticking away seconds that didn't exist, 5 minutes fast. I listened to the white noise from the baby monitor, a constant hiss that was supposed to be comforting, but felt like a warning. At 5:45, I heard stirring from the back room. Not just Sabrina, a man's cough, low and thick. Troy. So he was here. He had slept in my parents' bed while I was exiled to the living room. I sat up, running my hands through my hair, adopting the posture of someone confused and stiff from a long drive. I needed to be the concerned, tired sister, not the auditor. Not yet. Sabrina emerged from the hallway, holding Ivy on her hip. The baby was fussy, rubbing her face into Sabrina's shoulder. Sabrina, for her part, looked like she hadn't slept either, but her eyes were bright with a manic, defensive energy. "Morning," I said, my voice intentionally rough. "Is there coffee on the counter?" She said, nodding toward the machine. "Troy bought some." Troy. He was already providing, establishing his territory. I got up and moved to the kitchen, every muscle aching. This was my opening. I walked straight past the coffee and over to the mantel, picking up the blue realtor lanyard. The plastic tag felt cheap and oily in my hand. Asterisk Hearth Anchor Realty. Asterisk. I'm still stuck on this, Sabrina, I said, trying to sound more puzzled than accusatory. You inquired about appraisals. The house isn't even clear of probate. Who did you talk to? What did they say? Sabrina snatched a bottle from the counter, running it under hot water, her back to me. Just a guy. It was nothing, ISA. Just getting numbers. That's all. God? Just trying to be helpful for when we can sell. Helpful. How? Did they give you a number? I don't remember. Look, I've got Ivy to deal with. Fine, I said, dropping the lanyard. It clattered loudly on the wooden mantel. I pivoted. If you're managing the house, where are the utility statements? I've been paying them from Austin, but I need the actual account numbers. The bank flagged the last water payment because the invoice number was missing. A small tactical lie. Sabrina didn't even turn around. They are all electronic. Troy set all that up for Mom a while back to make it easier. It all goes to his email. Of course it did. A perfect firewall. All data routed through a single compromised server. I'd seen this strategy used by failing VPs trying to hide departmental losses. Silo the information, blame the system. Convenient. I said, pouring coffee I didn't want into a chipped mug. So Troy has access to all of Mom's accounts. He's helping, she hissed. Someone had to. I took a sip. It was bitter. I walked past her down the hall toward the study. I pulled the old, heavy brass key from my pocket, my original house key. And this, I said, stopping at the door with the keypad, you said Mom changed this. Yeah. She kept losing the old one. I held up my key. This one. I slid it toward the lock. It wasn't a keyhole. It was a numeric pad. This is a high-security keypad, Sabrina. This isn't a replacement lock from the hardware store. Mom wouldn't know the first thing about installing this, and it must have cost over $100. Where did that money come from? If you're counting nickels for formula. Her face, which had been pale, flushed a dark, angry red. You know what? I don't need this. I am trying to feed my daughter. A handyman put it in for Mom. She was worried about Dad's papers. Stop interrogating me. I'm not interrogating. I'm confused. Ivy started to cry, a full-throated wail. It was perfect timing. Sabrina turned, using the baby as a shield, and marched back into the kitchen. Just leave it alone, ISA. It's not your business. The house is 50% my business, I said, but my voice was low. She was already gone. I stood alone in the hallway. My phone was in my hand. I angled my body, blocking the view from the kitchen. Asterisk click dot asterisk a high-resolution photo of the keypad lock. I documented the brand, the model. I walked back to the kitchen, acting defeated. Sabrina was rocking Ivy, muttering about how I was stressing the baby out. I went to the coffee pot. While her back was turned, I leaned over the table where the pale blue ledger from last night still Saturday. The spine was turned toward me. Asterisk Cole household float, asterisk it red in gold leaf. Asterisk click dot asterisk. On the side of the refrigerator, held up by a tacky magnet shaped like a lobster, was a small yellow post-it note. A single date was circled in red marker, asterisk Friday dot asterisk below it, one word, asterisk signing dot asterisk asterisk click dot asterisk. My eyes scanned the large, messy fridge calendar above it. It was covered in Sabrina's looping handwriting, vet appointments for a dog I didn't know, phone numbers, and there on this coming Friday, the same day circled on the note, an entry, * County Clerk 93A*. Next to it, a small, triumphant heart doodle. *click. Signing at the county clerk's office at 9:30 a.m. I needed more. I needed to see what was in that plastic box. I'm going to wash my face, I mumbled. I feel disgusting. Whatever, she snapped. I walked to the linen closet in the hallway. It was halfway between the kitchen and the study. I opened the door. The familiar, suffocating smell of mothballs and old dry paper hit me. Sheets, blankets, a stack of threadbare towels, and on the floor, half hidden by a yellowed laundry basket, was the grey plastic file box. I knelt, my knees cracking in the silence. I reached for the handle of the laundry basket, intending to slide it aside. Don't touch that. Her voice was not the tearful, victimized voice from last night. It was flat, cold, and absolute. I froze, my hand hovering over the basket. I looked up. Sabrina was standing in the kitchen doorway. She wasn't holding Ivy. The baby was in a bouncer on the floor behind her. Her arms were crossed, her expression stripped of all pretense. That's just more of Mom's stuff, she said, her eyes like ice. It's private. It's a plastic box, Sabrina. I'm looking for a washcloth. I said, don't touch it. Get out of the closet. This was the line. This was the boundary. If I crossed it, this fragile cob false truce would shatter, and she would lock down completely. I didn't have enough data yet. I had a lot of anomalies, but no hard proof. I had to play along. I held up my hands, palms out. Fine, fine. Jesus. I stood up slowly, grabbing a musty-smelling blue washcloth from the shelf. I'm just tired. I'm sorry. It's a lot seeing the house like this. I retreated. I saw her shoulders drop just a fraction. The tension left her posture. She thought she'd won. She'd scared me off. I went into the grimy downstairs bathroom and ran the water, splashing my face. When I came out, I walked to the couch and collapsed onto it, pulling the Afghan over me. I'm going to try and get a few more hours of sleep, I said, my voice muffled by the wool. My alarm is set for 7:30. We can talk about this later. Figure out a plan. I made sure she saw me set the alarm, 7:30 a.m. I heard her let out a long, slow breath. It was the sound of someone who had just watched a car swerve at the last second. She thought the sale was safe. She thought I was neutralized, defeated by exhaustion and guilt. I lay there perfectly still. I heard her murmur to Troy. I heard the clink of a coffee mug. The house went quiet again. It was just after 6:30. I waited. I waited for an hour, 2 hours. The sliver of light coming through the curtains turned from grey to a pale, watery yellow. The house was deep in its morning quiet. The only sound was the baby, now breathing in the soft, rhythmic sigh of deep sleep over the monitor. At 8:15, I heard the back door open and close very softly. I waited. 10 minutes later, I heard it again. Someone had left. Someone had returned. Now, I slid off the couch. My sneakers were silent on the carpet. I grabbed my work bag, the one I dropped by the front door, from an inner accessories pocket. I pulled out a small telescoping metal rod. At the end was a circular inspection mirror, about 2 inches wide on a multi-angle hinge. I used it in Austin to check server port connections in the back of crowded racks. It was one of the most useful tools I owned. I padded down the hallway. I knew this floor. I knew the third board by the bathroom squeaked. And the one by the study door groaned. I avoided them. I knelt at the study door. The keypad lock was a silent black sentinel. I looked at the gap at the bottom. It was tight, maybe half an inch of clearance, if that. I telescoped the rod and angled the mirror. I slid it, millimeter by millimeter, under the door. It was dark inside. I clicked the tiny lead built into the handle of the tool. The small mirror lit up, reflecting the dark, dusty floor inside. I saw the legs of my father's desk, and I saw a stack of files. They weren't in a box, they were just sitting on the floor, right by the door, as if someone had dropped them there in a hurry. I angled the mirror, twisting my wrist until the labels came into focus. They were written in Sabrina's hurried cursive. My blood went cold. The top folder, * temporary guardianship, Ivy. * my stomach lurched. This wasn't just about the house. They were moving on her custody. Second folder, thinner, * limited POA. E. Miller. *. Limited power of attorney, Eileen Miller, our mother. And the bottom folder, the thickest one, the one that made my vision tunnel, * addendum. Home covenant. * It was here. It was right here. The missing document. The linchpin of the entire probate. The document our lawyer said no one could locate, was sitting on the floor in this locked room, underneath a forged power of attorney and a guardianship file. My father's voice rang in my ears, sharp as a siren, paper first, promises second. They weren't just squatting. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a meticulously planned theft, using my mother's signature and a baby's welfare as the tools. I retracted the mirror, my hand perfectly steady. The anger I felt wasn't hot, it was cryogenic. It was precise. It was fuel. I stood up and walked back to the couch. I sat down and pulled out my phone. The screen read 8:27 a.m. My alarm for 7:30 was a joke. I'd overslept. I opened my contacts and found a name I hadn't texted in almost 10 years, Nate Rios. We'd interned together at the Maple Hollow County Courthouse one summer. He'd stayed, loving the dusty absolute certainty of public records. I'd gone to the private sector. I typed, Nate, it's Isa Miller. Weirdest favor of all time. Are you in Maple Hollow? I need eyes on a parcel filing, and I need it an hour ago. Coffee on me. Dawn tomorrow. I stared at the screen. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. The reply came a full minute later. Isa, hell of a throwback. I'm not in at dawn. I'm at the annex by 6:30 every day. See you then. What's the parcel? I typed the address of my father's house. The response was instant. Oh, that one. Yeah, you better come in. We are having coffee now. I didn't bother faking it. Nate's text, you better come in. We are having coffee now, was an order, not an invitation. It was 8:28 in the morning. I slid off the couch, my joints stiff, my blood buzzing with a toxic mix of adrenaline and stale caffeine. The house was dead quiet. The baby monitor was silent. They were asleep, exhausted from their performance, confident in my defeat. I grabbed my car keys and my work bag. I didn't stop for shoes, just jammed my bare feet into the sneakers I'd left by the door. I scribbled a note on the back of a crumpled grocery receipt I found on the counter next to the pathetic, staged piles of coins, went for air. Need real coffee. It was vague enough to be plausible. I placed it on the table, a flimsy white flag of my supposed surrender. I eased the front door open, lifting it slightly so it wouldn't scrape the warped frame. It closed with a soft final click. The morning air was cool and damp. The sky a flat, unforgiving grey. Maple Hollow looked like a photograph left to fade in the sun. The records annex wasn't in the grand old courthouse downtown. It was a squat 1970s-era brick bunker attached to the back of the library, smelling of dusty insulation, weak coffee, and the faint acidic tang of microfilm. Nate Rios looked exactly the same, just 20 years older, the same wireframe glasses, the same frantic tuft of hair at his crown, but his face was etched with the profound tiredness of a man who processes the daily sins of an entire county. "ISA," he said, not standing. He just gestured to a stack of files on his desk. "You weren't kidding. Your parcel's the hottest ticket in the building." He didn't waste time. "I pulled the recent filings on the Miller parcel like you asked. It started last month, and you should sit down." "I didn't." "Show me." He sighed and pulled the first document from a heavy manila folder. "First, this, filed about 4 weeks ago." He slid it across the desk. It was a transfer repair easement. My eyes scanned the legalese, words I knew well from my own work: grantor, grantee, encumbrance, right-of-way. But this wasn't about a utility line. This was about access. It gave the grantee sweeping rights to prepare the property for sale, including all necessary repairs, alterations, and staging. Then I saw the grantor name, typed, * Pristine Miller Star. And below it, the signature. It was my name, scrawled in a shaky blue ink. It was a clumsy, hesitant imitation, like a child tracing a picture. It wasn't me. It wasn't even close. "That's not my signature," I said. My voice came out flat, all the air pressed out of it. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a cold, sharp, invasive violation, like finding a stranger's footprint in your shower. Someone had worn my name like a costume to a crime. "I figured," Nate said grimly. "But it gets worse. You can't just file an easement like that, especially with a clouded title. You need the authority to act. Which brings us." He slid a second document over. This, filed the same day, a companion document. A limited power of attorney. This was the document I'd seen under the study door. But this copy was filed, stamped, real. It purported to grant Sabrina Cole, as on-site caretaker, the authority to execute all necessary preparations for sale on behalf of our mother, Eileen Miller. I saw my mother's signature at the bottom. It looked real, frail, looping, slightly shaky, but real. Sabrina must have slipped it into a stack of repair papers, just as I'd feared. "Okay," I said, my mind racing. "So, Mom gave Sabrina POA to prepare, but Sabrina still needed your signature, as co-owner to file the easement. So, she faked it," Nate finished. "But look at the notary stamp on your forgery." I looked. The stamp, meant to be the final word of verification, was a disaster. It was smudged. The ink bled into the paper, as if the stamp had been rocked back and forth by a nervous hand. The notary's name was barely legible, Pauline Greevy. "Pauline Greevy," Nate murmured, tapping his screen. "Haven't heard that name in a while. Used to work out of a title office over on Maddox. But that stamp, that's not just sloppy, that's intentional. You smudge a stamp to hide an expired commission, or a fake one." "Who filed this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Nate spun his monitor around. The digital filing cover sheet. Agent, Hearth Anchor Realty. Submitting associate, Jen Nail. Jean Vale, not a name I knew, but the agency was the one on the lanyard hanging on my father's mantle. "And when is this all happening?" Nate pointed to a comment field on the filing. "They are scheduled to finalize the recording this Friday at 9:30 a.m. The heart doodle on the refrigerator calendar. County Clerk 93A. It wasn't a meeting, it was a victory party. They were pushing the sale through using a fraudulent easement from me and a coerced POA from my mother. And then there's this, Nate said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He pulled out the last attachment. I only found it because it was scanned as a badly formatted add-on to the POA. Look. My breath caught. There it was. Asterisk home covenant addendum. Asterisk the document that had stalled probate for a year. The missing piece. They had it, I whispered. She had it the whole time. She had part of it, Nate corrected, pointing to the bottom of the scanned page. Look at the numbering. Page 1 of 3. Now look at the next page. He flipped it. Page 3 of 3. The scan is terrible. They emerged, skewed. But page 2 is just gone. He leaned in, the fluorescent lights reflecting off his glasses. Someone rushed this, ISA. They scanned it on a dirty machine. They merged the pages to hide the missing one. They used a bad notary. And they forged your name. This isn't just a sale. This smells like a straw sale disguised as a maintenance agreement. They are trying to strip the title and flip it before probate even closes. I stood there, the paper cuts accumulating. Each document was a small, precise slice. The forged name, the smudged stamp, the missing page, the 9:30 a.m. signing. My strategist brain, the part of me that runs logistics, that sees the weak points in a chain, finally took over. The shock receded, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. Nate, I said, I need certified copies of everything. Every single page you just showed me right now. Already on it, he said, getting up and heading to the large, humming county copier. While he was gone, I took out my phone. I laid each document flat on the grey laminate desk. Asterisk click. Asterisk a photo of the forged easement. Asterisk click. Asterisk a photo of the smudged notary stamp. Asterisk click. Asterisk a photo of the POA. Asterisk click. Asterisk the inconsistent page numbers of the addendum. I was creating my own ledger, my own chain of evidence. I then pulled my wallet from my bag, from the deepest pocket. I slid out my passport. I opened it to the ID page, and laid it on the desk next to the forged transfer repair easement. I compared my real signature to the fake one. It was a terrible forgery, a desperate one. The angle was wrong. I signed with a consistent 5-degree forward slant. This was upright, hesitant, rigid. The loop height, my cursive I and L in Miller are open. Airy. These were pinched shut. The pen digging into the paper, as the forger paused to check their work. The pen pressure. My signature is a single fluid motion, the pressure even from start to finish. This one hesitated. I could see the ink bleed, the small tremor where the hand had paused after the S in EA, and then dug deep on the M in Miller. It wasn't a signature, it was a drawing of one. I noted every discrepancy. This was the kind of data that wins arguments. This was the kind of fact that cuts through charm. Paper first. Dad. My phone vibrated on the desk. A sharp, insistent buzz. It wasn't a text. It was a bank alert from Quarry Finch. The alert I had set up on the escrow account I personally funded for the house taxes and insurance, asterisk low balance. Alert your account. XXX 145 is below $100. Asterisk my blood didn't just go cold, it evaporated. I fumbled with the phone, my thumb slipping on the screen. I opened the banking app. The account was supposed to have just over $3,000 in it, my last quarterly deposit. The app loaded. Current balance, $84.12. I scrolled down. There it was, a single massive transaction. Pending debit, $5,000. They had taken more than was even in the account, triggering a massive overdraft. My eyes shot to the details. Transaction time, 5:41 a.m. this morning. While I was lying on the couch in the dark, while Sabrina was sleeping, while they were waiting for me to leave, the memo field contained only 2 words. HVAC deposit TM. Troy Maddox. It wasn't just a plan for Friday. It wasn't just a future theft. The theft was active. It was happening right now. They were draining my personal accounts, the money I had set aside to protect the house, using the fraudulent repair easement as justification. This changed everything. This wasn't a slow burn. This is a 5-alarm fire, Nate returned, placing a stack of crisp papers, each bearing a heavy embossed seal, on the desk. Certified copies. That's the full packet. I looked up from the bank alert on my phone. I looked at the certified forgery in my hand. I thought of the keypad lock, the coin counting performance, the hidden ledger, the role-play notes I hadn't even seen yet. My plan crystallized, hard as diamond. 1. Stop the signing. Friday at 9:30 was the kill switch. 2. Expose the forgery, the signature, the notary, the missing page. 3. Protect the house. That meant not just stopping the sale, but cleaning the title, voiding the POA, and reversing the easement. And 4. The most important rule, keep the baby out of the crossfire. The temporary guardianship file flashed in my mind. They would use her as a human shield. I wouldn't let them. I gathered the certified copies, my movements precise, economical, no wasted energy. Nate, I said, my voice perfectly level. This is beyond a clerk. I need a lawyer. I don't need a cheap one. I need the biggest, meanest, most meticulous shark in this tiny pond. Who is it? Nate didn't even blink. You don't want a shark. You want a surgeon. Elkea Voss. She doesn't just fight. She dissects. She's expensive. She's impossible to book. And she hates people like Troy Maddox more than she hates bad grammar. Her office opens in 20 minutes. Thank you, Nate. I walked out of the records annex into the flat morning light, the certified copies heavy in my bag, my phone already dialing. The game was no longer about discovery, it was about execution. Elkea Voss's office wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the mahogany and leather power room of a downtown shark. It was a small, brutally organized space in a converted Victorian house, smelling of old paper and sharp, citrusy tea. The walls were lined with white binders, each spine labeled with a precise, printed tag. It was the office of a systems analyst, not a brawler. Elkea Voss herself was a woman in her 50s, compact and wearing a dark grey suit that looked like it had been tailored from armor. She didn't offer condolences. She didn't offer coffee. She pointed to a chair. Nate Rios called ahead, she said, her voice a low, precise monotone. He said you have a compressed timeline and a significant fraud problem. You have 1 hour before my tennis match. Show me. I didn't waste time. I sat and laid the certified copies from the annex on her minimalist desk, the forged easement, the smudged notary stamp, the limited power of attorney with my mother's shaky signature, the addendum with page 2 of 3 missing. This is the fraud, I said. Then I placed my phone on the desk, the banking app open. And this is the theft in progress. $5,000 withdrawn from my personal escrow account at 5:41 this morning. Memo, HVAC deposit, TM Troy Maddox. Elkea Voss put on a pair of thin, rectangular glasses. She picked up the forged easement, then my passport, which I'd laid beside it. She looked between the 2 signatures for maybe 10 seconds. This is an insult, she said, though her tone didn't change. This forgery wouldn't pass a basic audit at a greeting card company. The pen pressure. She moved to the notary's stamp. Pauline Greevy. A flicker of something, recognition, distaste, crossed her face. She tapped the smudged commission number. This is laziness, or arrogance, or both. She sketched options on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving in sharp, clean lines. It wasn't a brainstorming session, it was a tactical deployment. Option 1, she said. We file for an emergency temporary restraining order today. We cite the forgery, the non-compliant notary, and the active theft. We freeze the parcel, freeze the account. It's loud. It's messy. It alerts them. They lawyer up. They hide assets. They shred. She looked at me. Option 2. We build a better trap. We let them walk into their 9:30 a.m. signing on Friday, and we serve them in the lobby. We do it publicly. It's cleaner, and we get their reactions in real time, in front of witnesses. The second one, I said without hesitation. A paper ambush. I want them to think they are safe until the last possible second. Good, she said, almost smiling. I prefer that one. It's more surgical. She picked up her desk phone. Sarah, I have a research task, Pauline Greevy. I want her notary commission status, bond information, and any complaints filed with the Secretary of State. I want it by noon. She hung up without saying goodbye. She turned back to me. We will draft 2 things immediately. First, a cease and desist to Hearth Anchor Realty, Cliff Knoll, the broker, and Jen Nail, the associate. It will name them as agents in a fraudulent conveyance, and warn them of liability and sanctions. Second, a formal notice of revocation for any and all purported power of attorney documents signed by Eileen Miller, citing undue influence and incapacity. We will file that with the court and the county recorder. But she held up a hand. We file nothing until Friday morning, just before the ambush. No alerts, no warnings. She leaned forward. Now, I need your part. The legal documents are the *what star. I need the *y star. I need a narrative timeline. The fraud is the crime, but the caretaker agreement is the motive, and the texts are the confession. Can you get that for me? I already have it, I said. I left her office and sat in my rental car. The quiet of the street, a stark contrast to the buzzing in my skull. I pulled out my laptop and started to build the file. I was an operations strategist. I built systems. Now, I was reverse engineering the system of my family's betrayal. I compiled the timeline, item, PDF of the signed caretaker agreement. I highlighted the clause in yellow, keys provided for maintenance oversight only, not to establish residency. This agreement grants no authority to encumber, lease, or sell the property. Sabrina's signature was clear at the bottom. Keys did not equal residency. Residency did not equal authority. Item. My Quarry Finch Bank statements for the last 2 years. A clean, unbroken chain of my payments for taxes and insurance, juxtaposed against the $5,000 withdrawal by TM item. I scrolled through 2 years of text messages with Sabrina. My blood ran cold all over again. It was a sea of emojis, forwarded memes, and desperate pleas for a few hundred to cover bills. And then I found it. A text from 6 months ago, just after Mom had signed the caretaker agreement. Sabrina, OMG, sis, thanks for handling the bank stuff. You're a lifesaver. This house is so much work. Me, just make sure nothing happens to it. And no funny business. We sell it together when probate clears. Sabrina, duh. Of course. Wouldn't dream of it. Can't sell without you anyway. Can't sell without you anyway. The winking emoji. The calculated, casual lie. I screenshot it, dated it, and dropped it into the file. This was the paper that proved her intent. Next, the hardest part. I had to call my mother. I had to do it before Elkaya did, before a cold, official summons landed on her apartment doorstep. I dialed. She picked up on the fourth ring, her voice thin and ready. "ISA, honey, are you in town? Sabrina said you were upset." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice level, sterile. "I'm at a lawyer's office in Maple Hollow. I'm looking at a document. It's a limited power of attorney, and it has your signature on it. It gives Sabrina the right to make decisions about the house." Silence, then a flustered defense. "Oh, that was nothing. It wasn't a big thing. Sabrina just said it was to speed up the repairs." "What repairs, Mom?" The furnace." "Yes, the furnace. Troy. He's so handy, you know. He said the furnace was a fire hazard. He said the bank needed proof he was allowed to fix it so he could get the money for the part. The $5,000 HVAC deposit. It wasn't just a theft, it was a theft she'd facilitated." "Mom, did you read what you signed?" Sabrina had Ivy, and the baby was crying, and Troy was on the phone. He just said it was paperwork, just to fix the furnace before it got cold. He said it would protect the house. I just signed what Sabrina brought. She said it was to help the pressure, the chaos, the crying baby, as a diversion. They hadn't just fooled her, they had produced the crisis. Manufacturing the time pressure to get her signature on a document that effectively handed them my inheritance. "Okay, Mom," I said, my voice cold. I couldn't feel pity. "Not now. Elkaya Voss, my attorney, will be sending you a new document, a revocation. You need to sign it today." "A revo, what?" Don't be difficult. Sabrina is just trying." "Mom," I cut her off. "They are trying to steal the house. They used your signature to do it. You will sign the revocation, or Elkaya will have you declared mentally incompetent and file for an emergency conservatorship. Do you understand me?" It was brutal. It was cruel. It was the only language that would cut through the fog of her loneliness and denial. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then a sob. "Yes," she whispered. "Okay. Okay, ISA." I hung up, feeling hollow. I'd just weaponized my mother's greatest fear against her, but the house was the priority. Paper first. I had my timeline. I had the revocation in motion. Now, I needed to secure the assets. First, Ivy. I would not have that baby in the crossfire. I called Mrs. Alder. "Helen," I said, "I have a very difficult family meeting on Friday morning at the house. It's going to be loud. Can you please take Ivy for a few hours from 9 a.m. Her voice was pure kindness. "Of course, dear. I'll be there. Don't you worry about that baby." Second, I called Sabrina. She picked up instantly, her voice suspicious. "Where are you meeting with a lawyer?" I said, feigning weariness about probate. "It's a mess, Sabrina. We have to be at the house on Friday morning, 10:30. I was setting a false time, an hour after the real signing. She wants to talk about the estate. It's going to be tense about the money. I think it's best if Ivy isn't there. I asked Mrs. Alder to watch her from 9, just to get her out of the house. Is that okay?" A long pause. She was calculating a meeting after the 9:30 signing. She'd already have the sale recorded. The meeting would be a moot point. I was, in her mind, a day late and $1 short. Yeah, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Yeah, that's probably smart. It's a lot for you. I know. 10:30 is fine. The baby was shielded. Third, I made 2 more calls. Maple Hollow Mobile Locksmith. A gruff voice answered. Hi, I said, I need to schedule a full rekey and deadbolt installation for a residential property on Friday. I'll need you on standby. The job will need to start, let's say, 11 a.m. Precisely, and I'll need a full lock ordered on an interior digital keypad. This is a Miller, I said. I need an emergency condition assessment on my father's property. I have reason to believe emergency repairs are being used to justify fraudulent withdrawals from an escrow account. I need official documentation that the HVAC system and foundation are in fact sound. That's a fraud claim, the inspector said, his voice suddenly sharp. I can be there this afternoon. I had the legal trap. I had the narrative. I had the baby secured. And I had the expert witnesses on the way to dismantle their $5,000 excuse. I drove back to Leia's office, my hand steady on the wheel. I uploaded the complete timeline file. She reviewed it in silence. Good, she said, closing the laptop. You've built the cage. Now we just have to wait for the animal to walk into it. I stood up, the adrenaline making me vibrate. I want to destroy them, Leia. Elke Voss looked at me, her eyes flat, devoid of passion. That's what your sister wants. That's what Troy wants. They want the big emotional win. They thrive on drama. You're not going to give it to them. She stood and handed me her card. Revenge isn't the goal, Ms. Miller, clean title is what we are after. We are not going for a courtroom confession. We are going for a summary judgment. We are going to be calm. We are going to be polite. We are going to let the facts drag the rest of them into the daylight. I spent the last 36 hours in a state of cryogenic rage. But as I walked into the lobby of Hearth Realty at 9:25 a.m. on Friday, I felt nothing. I was a system executing a function. The lobby smelled of stale coffee, industrial carpet cleaner, and the sharp, ozonic tang of a high-volume copier warming up. It was the scent of non-committal, everyday business. I sat in one of the uncomfortable grey tweed chairs, my certified copies in a slim leather briefcase on my lap. I looked like any other client, perhaps waiting for a mortgage broker. At 9:28, the glass doors swung open. Jen Nail, the junior associate whose name was on the filing, practically vibrated into the lobby. She was young, maybe 25, and wearing a bright blue suit that screamed first real job. She saw me sitting there, and her smile, which was already too bright, became a painful, high-wattage beam. You must be ISA, she chirped. Sabrina said you might be joining. It's so great you're all on the same page for this. It makes the whole process just smooth as silk. On the same page, I just nodded. My face a neutral mask. I'm here for the signing. Her smile faltered just a fraction. I wasn't matching her energy. I was a dead data point in her cheerful system. Of course, they are just on their way. At 9:29, the doors opened again. This time, it was Troy and Sabrina. Troy was a monument to cheap ambition. He wore a navy blue blazer that was at least 2 sizes too proud in the shoulders, straining across his back, paired with jeans. He looked like he was about to pitch a timeshare. He had one arm draped possessively over Sabrina's shoulder, and as they walked in, he gave her a little pat. It wasn't a gesture of affection. It was the pat of a man sealing a deal, a co-conspirator in what he imagined was a brilliant act of philanthropy, starring himself. Sabrina looked terrible. She was pale, her eyes darting nervously around the lobby. She was wearing her best, which was a faded floral dress, and she was twisting her hands together. When she saw me, she physically recoiled, as if she hadn't expected me to actually be here, inside the building. Troy's hand on her shoulder tightened, steering her forward. "ISA," Sabrina said, her voice a whisper. "Sabrina," I replied, my tone level. "Troy." Troy just nodded at me, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. It was the man in charge. He drained my bank account, and was now here to steal my house. Before anyone else could speak, a third man floated out from a back hallway. This had to be Cliff Knoll, the managing broker. He was in his 60s, with a perfect silver coif of hair, and a voice so smooth it felt oiled. "Folks, wonderful, wonderful," Jen Nail said. "We are all here. This is just the kind of win-win pathway we love to see. Family, legacy, moving forward together." He beamed at all of us, the benevolent shepherd guiding his flock. "Now, Jenna has the final signature packet in the conference room. If you'll just follow me." "Before we do," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the synthetic warmth. Everyone stopped. Cliff turned, his smile still stapled in place, but his eyes narrowed. "I'd like to see the file," I said. "The full closing packet, including the covenant addendum, the POA, and the easement agreement." Cliff let out a practiced, dismissive chuckle. "Well, that's all part of the final paperwork. Our title team has reviewed everything. It's all in order. We sign, then you get your copies. Standard procedure." "It's not standard procedure for me," I said, still seated. "I'm a party to this. I'm asking to see the file before I enter that room." Troy shifted, his arrogance curdling into impatience. "Look, we are all busy here. The appointment's at 9:30. Let's just get the paperwork signed. ISA, don't make this difficult." "I agree," a new voice said. The glass doors opened again. It was exactly 9:32 a.m. Elkea Voss entered. She was, as I'd expected, a vision of surgical precision in a charcoal grey suit. She was not alone. Behind her was a tall, bored-looking man in a wrinkled windbreaker holding a stack of manila envelopes. He was a process server. Elkea's eyes swept the room, cataloguing every person. "The appointment is at 9:30, but it's not for a signing." She nodded to the process server. He stepped forward. "Clifford Knoll." Cliff blinked, just nodded dumbly. The server handed him the first envelope. "You have been served. Jen Nail Vale." Jen Nail looked like she was going to be sick. She took the envelope with a trembling hand. I don't." "Troy Maddox." Troy didn't take his, he just stared at it. The server dropped it at his feet. "You have been served. Sabrina Cole." Sabrina flinched. A small, wounded animal sound escaping her. She took the packet, and the server, walking over to the receptionist, a young woman with a headset, who looked utterly terrified, placed the final envelope on her desk. "This is for Hearth Realty as a corporation." In the back of the office, a large photocopier, which had been humming, suddenly let out a loud, grinding asterisk clack, clack, clack asterisk as it jammed. The noise was violent in the sudden, tomb-like silence. Troy flinched. It was a full-body jerk, a spasm of pure, uncut panic. The small chaos of the copier had revealed the massive chaos of his nerves. His smug mask didn't just crack, it evaporated. "What is this?" Cliff demanded, his voice no longer smooth. He was ripping open the envelope. "A TRO, a petition." "What? What is this nonsense?" I finally stood up, holding my own briefcase. "This," I said, my voice neutral, is where we stop. I looked past Cliff, past the panicking Jen Nail, to the receptionist. I have a question for your records. I need to see the notary. Pauline Greavy, is she in today? The receptionist's eyes went wide. She looked at Cliff, then back at me. Pauline. Oh. She's not in-house. She's remote today. She's remote. LK Voss echoed, her voice dripping with satisfaction. How convenient. Because my clerk received confirmation from the Secretary of State's office this morning. Pauline Greavy's notary commission expired 3 months ago, and it was suspended pending review after 2 prior complaints for false acknowledgement. Cliff's face went white. Jen Nailvale looked like she might faint. Now, I don't know what you've been told, Cliff sputtered, turning on Troy and Sabrina. He was already building his firewall, pivoting to plausible deniability. Hearth Realty is only acting on the authority provided to us. We were presented with a notarized easement and a power of attorney. We acted in good faith. Good faith, Elkaya said, stepping forward. Does not excuse gross negligence. She pulled one of my certified copies from her own briefcase. It was the Home Covenant Addendum. This is the addendum you filed, Elkaya said, holding it up. Page 1 of 3, followed by page 3 of 3. Page 2 is missing. Did your title team, in their good faith review, not notice the gap? Or did you just not care? She didn't wait for an answer. She held up the forged easement. And this, she continued, the notary's stamp. Even if Ms. Greavy's commission were valid, which it is not. The partial ID number on this smudge is a direct violation of state statute. Let me see. She pulled out her glasses. Ah, yes. State Code Section 189B, false acknowledgement. A civil penalty of up to $10,000 per violation. The room was a vacuum. All the air had been sucked out of it. The lobby, moments before a place of business, had become a witness stand. Jen Nailvale, the junior associate, was the first to break. She was shaking, tears welling in her eyes. She pointed a trembling finger at Sabrina. I didn't. She told me. She told me it was fine. She said her sister was in Austin and that she just signed it. She said ISA signed it last night and overnighted it. The body language of the entire room shifted. The conspiracy, which had been a solid block, fractured into pieces. Troy's head snapped toward Jen Nail, his eyes full of venom. He had been betrayed by the weakest link. Cliff Knoll took a physical step away from all of them, isolating himself, his hands up as if to ward off the stain. And Sabrina just crumbled. She didn't cry. She just deflated, her shoulders sinking, the envelope slipping from her fingers to the floor. She stared at Jen Nail, not with anger, but with the blank, empty expression of total defeat. I looked at all of them. At Troy, vibrating with silent rage. At Jen Nail, sobbing into her hands. At Cliff, already calculating his call to the brokerage's legal counsel. At Sabrina, who had traded our entire family legacy for this. I kept my voice even, cold, procedural. This ends now, I said. They all looked at me. There will be no signing. No documents are recordable today. The TRO is filed. A fraud alert has been placed with the county recorder, tied to my name and this parcel. LK's clerk is at the courthouse right now filing the revocation of my mother's POA. Any attempt by Hearth Anchor to move forward, to file any paperwork, or to contact my mother will be considered willful and active participation in fraud. We will see you in court. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The facts were doing all the shouting. I turned to Elkaya. We are done here. We walked out, leaving them standing in the ruins of their 9:30 signing, the sound of the jammed copier still beeping insistently, a frantic, unanswered alarm. We didn't run. We walked. We left the lobby of Hearth Realty and stepped out into the bright, indifferent sunlight of a Maple Hollow morning. We didn't speak until we were back in Leia's brutally organized office. The door closed, the citrus tea smell grounding me. Good, Elkaya said, as if commenting on a favorable weather report. They are destabilized. Their conspiracy just fractured. Cliff will call his attorney. Jen Nail will cry. And Troy will try to intimidate Sabrina. They will all be telling different, self-serving lies by noon. She sat at her desk, and I took the client chair. We were a war room, and the battle had just been won, but the settlement was still pending. My phone buzzed. It was an email, not a text. It was from Nate Rios. Nate's been busy, I said, opening the file. He said he'd do some digging on the digital submission of the POA. I read the email aloud. ESA ran a trace on the upload timestamp for that bogus POA filing. It didn't come from Hearth servers. The IP address 72.1144x is registered to a commercial account under the name Maddox Auto Title. That's Troy's side business, isn't it? He didn't just file it with them. He filed it from his own shop. Of course he did, Elkaya murmured, writing it down on her legal pad. The arrogance. He used his own digital footprint. She looked up, her expression sharp. That moves this from civil negligence on the realtor's part to active conspiracy. They accepted a document uploaded from the beneficiary's personal business. They knew. Her desk phone rang. She picked it up, listened for a moment, and said, "Thank you, Sarah. Email me the report." She hung up and looked at me. My clerk's report on Pauline Greevy, the notary. As we suspected, her commission expired, specifically 3 months ago. More importantly, her bond insurer, the company that covers her for mistakes, has 2 other complaints on file against her, both flagged in the last year, both related to real estate transactions, both filed by Maddox Auto Title. So, she's his personal forger, I said. She's his sloppy, compromised, and now useless tool, Elkaya corrected. And she's the leverage we'll use to flip him. She pulled a document from a fresh white binder on her desk. It was the original caretaker agreement, the one Mom had signed, the one I'd insisted on reviewing. The IP trace and the notary complaint are the *how*, Elkaya said, sliding the paper across the desk. This is the *why*, it's illegal. This is the hard stop. She tapped a clause on the second page, the non-resident clause, the one I'd had the lawyer add. And right next to it, in the tiny margin, was a familiar looping initial. She initialed it, I whispered, the blood drained from my face. She knew. She knew the agreement specifically forbade her from establishing residency. She knew it gave her 0 authority. She initialed the damn line. Yes, Elkaya said. She knew. Which makes her plea of just needing a place to stay premeditated fraud. This initial, she tapped it again, is her confession. Elkaya picked up her phone again. Yes, Dr. Almasi. Lavos. I'm sending you 2 encrypted files right now. File A is a certified passport signature. File B is a contested signature on a forged legal document. I need a same-day preliminary opinion. What's your fee? Understood. You'll have it in 5 minutes. She hung up. The handwriting expert would confirm what we already knew. He'd give us the technical language, reverse slant, stroke hesitation, inconsistent pen pressure. He'd turn our observation into evidence. The legal case was a cage, and every bar was now in place. But I felt a cold, pulling dread. The plastic file box, the one in the linen closet, the one Sabrina had guarded like a snake. I had the legal facts. I needed the human ones. I have to go back, I said. Elkaya raised an eyebrow. Back to the house. It's a volatile environment. I advise against it. I set a fake meeting with Sabrina for 10:30, I explained, checking my watch. It was just after 10 o'clock, with a fake lawyer. She's expecting me. Mrs. Alder has Ivy. She's safe. But Sabrina, she'll be there, and she'll be alone. Troy will have run. And what do you hope to gain? The rest of Mom's papers, I said, the lie tasting like ash. The plastic file box. Elkaya stared at me, then nodded once. Document everything. Don't engage. Be a camera, not a sister. I drove back to the house. The sagging porch looked even more defeated. I'd left less than an hour ago, but it felt like a year. Mrs. Alder's car was gone, which meant Ivy was safe, away from this toxicity. I used my key, the one that always stuck. The door scraped open. The house was silent, but the air was electric with defeat. Troy's oversized blazer was gone. His muddy boots were gone. He had fled. Sabrina was in the living room. She wasn't at the table. She was on the floor, surrounded by the three Mom's papers. Do not touch boxes. She had ripped them open. Old photo albums, tax returns from 1998, and bundles of my mother's letters were scattered across the dirty carpet. She was frantically digging through them, as if she could find a different, better version of the past. She looked up when I walked in. Her face was a ruin, puffy, streaked with tears, but her eyes were empty. The fight was gone. The performance was over. He's gone, she whispered. Her voice was a dry rattle. Troy, he said. He said I'd screwed it all up. He said Jenna caving was my fault. He took the car. Where is the file box from the closet, Sabrina? Her voice was hollow. Why, she said. Why? What's in it? More? More of that. She gestured to the legal papers she'd dropped in the half-anchor lobby, which were now on the floor beside her. I need it. The lawyer needs it for the meeting. There's no meeting, is there? ISA. She looked at me, a flicker of the old, manipulative intelligence in her eyes. There was never a 10:30 lawyer. That was just for me. Her phone, lying screen up on the carpet beside her, buzzed. We both looked at it. A banner preview lit up the screen. A text from Troy. My blood froze. His message, clear as day, asterisk if it blows up, we pivot to family misunderstanding. Don't admit anything. They have no proof. Asterisk. Sabrina flinched. A raw, painful gasp. Don't admit. He was cutting her loose. He was leaving her to carry the entire conspiracy. And his last instruction was to lie for him. I had my phone in my hand. I raised it. My movements deliberate. Sabrina was too stunned to react. I aimed my camera at her phone screen. Asterisk click. Asterisk a perfect, time-stamped screenshot of his text. The conspiracy in his own words. The box, I said, my voice like ice. She didn't fight. She just gestured weakly toward the hallway. In the closet. Take it. Take it all. I don't care anymore. I walked to the linen closet. I pulled the grey plastic file box from under the towels. It was heavier than I expected. I walked back through the living room, past my sister, who was now just a woman sitting in a pile of meaningless paper. I didn't say goodbye. I got to my rental car and locked the doors. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, the silence of the suburban street oppressive. I placed the box on the passenger seat and opened the lid. It was worse than I could have imagined. The top layer was a stack of bright blue sticky notes. Each one had a line written in Sabrina's looping cursive. They were script notes. My stomach turned. Say baby formula. Say utilities. Need cash for shut-off notice. Wait. Look surprised when ISA arrives. If she asks about money, cry. Pause for tears. This was the performance from the first night. The coin counting, the desperation. It had all been rehearsed. This box was their playbook. Beneath the sticky notes was a manila folder. I opened it. A single, clean sheet of tracing paper. On it, my name, Isa Miller, was traced over and over, the lines shaky, hesitant. And beneath that, a fresh sheet from a legal pad. My name written again and again, the forger practicing, gaining confidence, trying to get the slant right. This was the forgery from conception to execution. I pulled out my phone. I didn't just take a picture. I held the tracing paper up to the side light coming through the car window. The indentations, the pen pressure, the hesitation I'd noted in the annex. It was all there. A physical map of the crime. Asterisk click, click, click dot asterisk. My restraint was deliberate. I was not a woman wronged. I was an auditor documenting a catastrophic failure. I refused to perform outrage. I would just let the ledger tell its own story. I dug deeper. A checkbook register, not personal. Maddox auto title. My eyes scanned the carbon copies. And there it was. 3 weeks ago. Pay to Jen Nail. Amount, $1,500. Memo, push. Covenant and addendum. Closing and acquisition. It didn't matter. It was a bribe. It was the consulting fee that had bought her silence and cooperation. At the very bottom of the box, I saw it. The document I had glimpsed with my inspection mirror, the temporary guardianship template. I pulled it out, my hands suddenly unsteady. It was, as I'd feared, auto-filled. It was a petition. It listed Sabrina as the birth mother and sought to grant temporary and exclusive guardianship to Troy Maddox. It was dated for next week. They weren't just stealing the house. They were planning to steal the baby. They were building a paper trail to have Sabrina, a mother they were actively rendering homeless and penniless, declared unfit, and to give Troy, the man who just abandoned her via text, full legal control. I stared at it. This was the weapon. This one document would destroy Sabrina utterly. I could give this to Leah, and Leah would use it to have Sabrina's parental rights terminated before the end of the day. I looked at the document. I thought of Ivy. I thought of the soft coos from the baby monitor. I thought of my promise to keep her out of the crossfire. I refused to weaponize a child. I took the guardianship paper, folded it, and put it back in the bottom of the box. I did not take a picture. I did not log it. I locked it back, untouched. My fight was not with my sister's motherhood, broken as it was. My fight was with the forgery that had tried to erase my father's legacy. I closed the lid. I had the script. I had the practice sheets. I had the bribe. I had the conspiracy text. It was more than enough. I drove back to Leah's office. My movements calm. My face set. I walked in and sat down. He's fled, I said. Sabrina is broken, and I have their playbook. I emailed her the photos one by one, the sticky notes, the tracing paper, the check stub, the screenshot of Troy's text. Leah Voss watched the files appear on her monitor. She didn't speak, she just read. When she got to the check stub, She let out a long, slow breath. $1,500. $1,500. That's not a bribe. That's an insult. He paid a junior associate $1,500 to help him steal a $300,000 property. Her phone rang. She answered, listened. "Thank you, doctor." She hung up. "Dr. Almasi, the handwriting expert," she said. "His preliminary opinion is, and I quote, it is highly unlikely the signature on the easement was produced by the same author as the passport. The signature is drawn, not written, exhibiting significant stroke hesitation, and a reversed lateral slant inconsistent with the known sample." She steepled her fingers, looking at me. The last trace of pragmatic calm was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp energy. "This is no longer just a civil fraud. Ms. Miller," she said. "The act of bank theft, the bribe to the agent, the coordinated script, the conspiracy evidenced by the text. This is criminal. We are no longer waiting for a standard hearing." She picked up her phone. Her voice was steel. "Sarah, get me Judge Aaron Keller's clerk. I am filing an ex parte motion for an emergency hearing. Effective immediately. Subject, fraudulent conveyance, grand theft, and conspiracy. I want a slot this afternoon." We weren't given a week. We weren't given a day. Leia's motion was accepted on an emergency basis. And at 3 p.m. that same afternoon, we were standing in the ugliest room I had ever been in. This wasn't a grand, oak-paneled courtroom. This was Maple Hollow County Court, hearing room 3B. It was a windowless box of beige drywall, scuffed laminate tables, and that inescapable 1980s smell of floor wax and stale air. The fluorescent lights buzzed, a low, constant note of anxiety. Judge Armand Keller presided. He looked less like a judge and more like a high school shop teacher who'd seen every possible excuse. He had a face etched with impatience and a profound lack of patience for drama. He only cared about citations. He didn't even have a gavel, just a heavy black stapler that he rested his hand on. Leia and I sat at the petitioner's table. Across the narrow aisle sat Sabrina. She had managed to find counsel, a young, exhausted-looking public defender, who was frantically flipping through a file that was far too thin. In the gallery behind Sabrina, sitting 2 rows apart like strangers at a bus stop, were Cliff Nall and Jen Nailvale from Hearth. They both looked green. Troy Maddox was not present. "Ms. Voss," Judge Keller said, his voice like gravel. "I've read your ex parte motion. You claim emergency. You claim fraud. The bar for this is high. This sounds like a family probate matter. Why is it in my courtroom at 3 p.m. on a Friday?" Leia stood. She didn't approach a podium. She just stood, her hands resting on the binder in front of her. She was a picture of absolute, lethal calm. "Your Honor, this is not a probate matter. This is an active criminal fraud and grand theft in progress. We are here to prevent irreparable harm to the title of the property and to my client's assets, which are being drained as we speak." She laid the scaffold. She didn't argue. She presented a stack of undeniable, interconnected facts. First, she said, we have Exhibit A, the caretaker agreement, dated October of last year. It grants Ms. Cole, the respondent, keys for maintenance only. It includes a non-resident clause, which you will note bears Ms. Cole's own initials. It grants zero authority to encumber or sell. Sabrina's lawyer was already shuffling. Second, Leia continued, we have Exhibit B, bank statements from Quarry Finch, demonstrating my client, Ms. Miller, has been the sole party funding the taxes and maintenance escrow for this property for 3 years. Third, Exhibit C, the fraudulent transfer repair easement filed 4 weeks ago, bearing the forged signature of my client. We have attached the preliminary opinion of a forensic handwriting expert, Dr. Almasy, who states it is highly unlikely to be Ms. Miller's signature, noting significant hesitation and reversed lateral slant. Fourth, Exhibit D, the notary stamp on that fraudulent easement. The notary, Pauline Greevy, has a commission that expired 3 months ago, and is currently under suspension by the Secretary of State for 2 prior complaints of false acknowledgement. Fifth, Exhibit E, the IP log extract from the county's digital filing system. The fraudulent easement and the coerced power of attorney from my client's mother were not uploaded from the realtor's office. They were uploaded from an IP address registered to Maddox's auto title, the personal business of Mr. Troy Maddox, the respondent's partner. And sixth, Your Honor, Exhibit F, a copy of a check stub from Maddox auto title, showing a payment of $1,500 to Ms. Jen Nail Vale of Hearth Realty, the filing agent, 1 week prior to the filing. The memo line reads, C.A. push. Leah paused. The buzzing of the fluorescent light seemed to get louder. Cliff Knoll had his head in his hands. This is not a misunderstanding, Your Honor. This is a coordinated conspiracy to steal a house. Judge Keller looked at Sabrina's lawyer. Counselor, your response. The young lawyer stood, his papers rattling. Your Honor, my client, this is a terrible family misunderstanding. He used the exact phrase from the pivot Troy had texted. My stomach tightened. My client has been acting as the sole caretaker for her ailing mother, he went on, his voice weak. Miller, the petitioner, lives hundreds of miles away. My client was merely trying to facilitate necessary repairs, the furnace. Your Honor, the house was in disrepair. She was trying to protect the asset. This is a probate matter, not fraud. We vehemently deny these allegations, and we request a continuance. We need at least 30 days to gather the facts to respond to these exhibits. Leah was on her feet before he'd even finished the word continuance. Your Honor, 30 days is 30 days too late. Facilitating repairs does not explain a forged signature. It does not explain a bribe, and it does not explain the $5,000 illegal withdrawal from my client's personal bank account this morning. She slid the bank statement, Exhibit G, onto the judge's bench. The harm is not theoretical. It is active. Any delay risks further theft and irreparable damage to the chain of title. We request an immediate temporary restraining order, voiding of the fraudulent instruments, and an order for the respondent to vacate. Judge Keller held up his hand. Silence. He looked at the empty seat next to Sabrina's lawyer. Where is Mr. Maddox? We were unable to locate him for service, Your Honor. And since Mr. Maddox has chosen not to appear in a hearing regarding his own affidavit, Keller said flatly, that affidavit is struck from the record. Lack of appearance, hearsay. He then swiveled his chair just slightly to look into the gallery. His eyes landed on Cliff and Jen Nail. Mr. Knoll, Ms. Vale, you are officers of your brokerage. You are licensed by the state. Are you aware that I have on my desk a check stub suggesting your agent accepted an inducement payment to file a fraudulent instrument using an expired notary, and that your brokerage was, at best, grossly negligent in its failure to verify the chain of title, or the authenticity of the signatures? Cliff Knoll, the smooth-talking broker, stood up. He was no longer smooth. He was terrified. Judge, we were acting on the authority provided. We had no. You had a forged document uploaded from a third-party IP address, Mr. Knoll. That is not good faith. That is willful blindness. I am advising you both that your continued participation in this matter risks immediate sanctions from this court, and a formal referral to the State Licensing Board. You will not conduct any further business related to this parcel. You will not contact Ms. Eileen Miller. You will not shred a single piece of paper. Do you understand me? Yes, Your Honor. They both whispered. Two ghosts in cheap suits. They sat down. Keller turned his gaze finally to Sabrina. She did the only thing she knew how to do, the one thing that had worked her entire life. She began to cry. It wasn't loud. It was the performance I had seen before, but now perfected for a legal setting. Silent, wrenching sobs. Her shoulders shook. She put her face in her hands. Your Honor, she wept, her voice cracking. I was just trying to help my mom. I didn't understand the papers, Troy said. He said it was just to fix the furnace. Judge Keller watched her. He didn't interrupt. He let her performance hang in the air, the sound of her manufactured grief filling the small room. He let the silence stretch, becoming awkward, then unbearable. When she finally tapered off, sniffing, he leaned forward, his voice dangerously quiet. Miss Cole, are you done? Sabrina looked up, startled. I have before me, the judge said, Exhibit H. It is a photograph of several sticky notes in your handwriting. One of them, he put on his glasses and read from the file, instructs you to, and I quote, pause for tears. The sound of Sabrina's breathing stopped. It was like a switch had been thrown. The tears, the shaking, the grief had all ceased instantly. Her face, which had been crumpled in sorrow, went blank with a cold, pale shock. It was the most terrifying, most revealing moment I had ever witnessed. Her one tool, her one currency, had just been declared counterfeit. So I ask you again, Judge Keller said, his voice cutting through the room. Is this the pause, or am I to look at Exhibit F, the $1,500 CA push memo? Which is it, Ms. Cole? Are you a grieving daughter, or a co-conspirator? She said nothing. Her lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no argument. Paper had just beaten charm decisively. Judge Keller nodded as if his hypothesis had been proven. He picked up his stapler and set it down, the thud echoing like a gavel. The petition for a temporary restraining order is granted, effective immediately. No sale, no encumbrance, no new liens on the property, Ms. Cole. He looked directly at her. The caretaker agreement is void due to material breach. You are not a tenant. You have no right of residency. You will have 48 hours from this moment to remove your personal effects and those of Mr. Maddox. After 3 p.m. Sunday, you will be trespassing. He wasn't done. Furthermore, the court orders you to disclose all communications, texts, and emails, with Troy Maddox, Hearth Realty, Cliff Knoll, and Jen Nail Vale regarding this property. The court authorizes a full forensic imaging of your electronic devices to be conducted immediately. At that, Sabrina finally broke. A real sound. A guttural sound of pure animal terror. The phone. The phone, she said, had everything. Judge Keller looked at me. Ms. Miller, does the petitioner have anything to add? I stood. My heart was hammering, but my voice was steady. I was not there to gloat. I was not there for revenge. I was there for the title. I was there for my father. Just one sentence, Your Honor, I said, my voice clear in the quiet room. I want my father's home clean, not my sister punished. Judge Keller looked at me. A flicker of something, not kindness, but perhaps understanding, in his hawk-like eyes. Cleaning often reveals the stained source, Ms. Miller, he replied. Hearing adjourned. He stood and swept out of the room. The bailiff, a heavy-set man by the door, looked at me and gave me a single, short nod. It was halfway there. It was progress. Leia and I gathered our binders. Sabrina was still frozen in her chair, staring at the laminate table, as her lawyer tried to explain what forensic imaging meant. We walked out of the sterile quiet of the courtroom into the chaotic hallway. It was over. A woman with a notepad and a man with a large news camera were hovering. Maple Hollow wasn't a big town, but a fraud suit involving the county's most prominent win-win pathway broker was news. Ms. Miller. Ms. Miller. Is it true? Hearth tried to steal your family home. Ms. Voss, are criminal charges being filed? Leah just steered me forward. No comment. I didn't speak. I just held up the thick packet of paper the clerk had handed me on the way out, the freshly stamped temporary restraining order. It was still warm from the copier. I held it in front of me like a shield. I had my paper, and it had at last protected me. The temporary restraining order was paper, not a magic wand. It was a shield, not a sword. The judge had given Sabrina 48 hours to vacate, until Sunday at 3 p.m. But the TRO only addressed the civil fraud. It didn't touch the criminal conspiracy, the forgery, the bribe, the theft. Troy was still out there. He had fled, but he hadn't vanished. And Sabrina was a black hole of liability, ready to drag everyone down with her. Leah and I had debriefed in her office. The DA's office, spurred by the IP trace and the check stub, was already moving. They had enough to file. But they wanted a confession. They wanted the conspiracy tied up cleanly. The problem, Leah had said, her voice dry, is Troy. He's a classic manipulator. He'll let Sabrina take the entire fall. The forgery, the bank theft. He'll say she did it all, and he was just helping. Right now, she's terrified, but she's still protecting him, Leah continued. You have to pull that thread. You have to offer her a path that doesn't involve him. So, we devised a setup within the setup. I called Sabrina that evening. She answered on the first ring. Her voice a dead, hollow whisper. The TRO gives you 48 hours, I said, my voice flat, procedural. That's until Sunday. I'm coming by tomorrow morning, Saturday, at 10 a.m. We are going to divide our parents' personal belongings. The court order allows for removal of personal effects. This qualifies. Be there? ISA, I don't know. 10 a.m. Sabrina. I hung up. The next morning, I arrived at 9:15. The first thing I did was call Mrs. Alder. She was there in 5 minutes, her face a map of worry and kindness. How is she, dear? The baby, Ivy, is fine, I said, helping her buckle the infant into the car seat. But I need her away from here. We have to talk. It won't be quiet. I couldn't tell her that a detective was sitting in an unmarked car half a block away. I couldn't tell her this was the final act. You poor girl, she said, patting my arm. You take all the time you need. We'll be at the park. Not a soul within earshot. I watched her drive away. The small, innocent life secured, safe from the shrapnel. The lines were clear. This was not about the child. This was about the crime. I went back inside. The house smelled like defeat and old coffee. I walked to the kitchen table, the one where this all started with the coins. I sat down and began my own setup. From my bag, I pulled my father's old dictation recorder. It was a brick from the 1990s, heavy black plastic with actual cassette buttons. He'd used it to draft letters and memos. I'd found it in his study, and I'd put fresh batteries in it. It was a nostalgia decoy. I placed it on the table right next to the wall clock that was still running 5 minutes fast. I pressed the small red button. It wasn't a secret. The record button clicked loudly, and a small, steady red light appeared on the top. It just looked like a power indicator, a relic from a dead technological era. Leia had been clear. Our state was a one-party consent state. I was that one party. Next, I laid out the evidence, not as a pile, but as a story, left to right on the scratched laminate, photocopies, never the originals. 1. The caretaker agreement with her SC initial next to the non-residency clause. 2. The forged easement with Dr. Almus's notes scrolled in the margin. 3. The report on Pauline Greavy's expired, suspended notary commission. 4. The printout of the IP log tracing the upload to Maddox's auto title. 5. The carbon copy of the $1,500 check to Jen Nail Vale. 6. The photographs of her sticky notes. Pause for tears. It was a timeline of her choices, a ledger of her betrayal. I sat and I waited. The only sound in the room was the lying clock and the faint, almost imperceptible whir of the cassette tape turning. At 10:03, Sabrina's key scraped in the lock. She shuffled in, looking like a ghost. She was pale, shaking, her eyes darting to the empty spot on the floor where Ivy's bouncer used to be. She's with Mrs. Older, I said. She's safe. Sit down, Sabrina. She saw the papers on the table. She saw the recorder. She didn't seem to register either of them. She just sank into the chair opposite me, the one where she had sat performing her poverty, counting coins. They took my phone, she whispered. The court. They took my phone. They are imaging it. I know. I pushed the first photocopy toward her. The agreement. You initialed this, Sabrina. You knew you couldn't live here. You knew you had no authority. That was the first lie. I pushed the second. The forgery. This was the second. This isn't my signature. We both know it. The expert knows it. I pushed the third and fourth. This was the asterisk house star. An expired notary. Troy's own IP address. He didn't even bother to hide it. I pushed the fifth. The bribe. He paid Jen Nail Vale $1,500. He paid her to help steal our family home. Sabrina, how much was he paying you? That got a reaction. A flinch. It wasn't like that, was it? I slid the last photo across, the sticky notes, her handwriting. Pause for tears. She stared at it. She stared at the proof of her own script, and she finally, completely broke. She put her head down on the table, not in a performance, but in a gesture of total, abject surrender. You have one path, I said, my voice cold, calm. This was the script Leia and I had rehearsed. 1. You are currently facing multiple felony charges, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, grand theft. You will lose Ivy, you will go to prison, and Troy will be in his truck driving to another state, and he will not send you a single letter. She sobbed, a dry, racking sound. Or, I continued, you tell the truth right now. You become the state's witness. You tell them everything. You tell them about the bribe, about the notary, about the signature. You give them Troy. You do that, and I will personally ask the district attorney to consider a diversion program, probation, restitution for the $5,000. Community service. You won't do time. You'll have a chance to keep your daughter. But you have to choose, Sabrina. Right now. Keep lying, and he will let you carry this entire thing alone. She was shaking her head, tears dripping onto the laminate. I can't. I can't. You can't, or you won't. The front door slammed open, crashing against the wall. What the hell is this? Troy Maddox burst into the kitchen. He wasn't the proud, preening man from the broker's office. He was a cornered animal. His eyes were bloodshot. His face was slick with sweat, and he was vibrating with a greasy, terrified rage. He had come back, not to save Sabrina, but to control her, to make sure she didn't break. "What is this?" he snarled, jabbing a finger at the papers on the table. "More of your legal theatrics. You think these copies mean anything?" He looked at Sabrina, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "You get your stuff. We are leaving. You're not to say a word to her. She's not going anywhere." "Troy," I said, my voice steady. "Oh, really?" he laughed. A short, ugly bark. He saw the grey plastic file box, the one I had imaged and then returned, sitting by the back door where I'd left it. "You think you're so smart? You think you have everything?" He scoffed and reached for the file box, the one containing the real evidence, the playbook, the tracing paper, the guardianship petition. "You don't even have the originals," he spat, his hand closing on the lid. "It doesn't matter," I said. He froze. "I already imaged the entire box. Troy, days ago," I continued, "the DA has the tracing paper you used to practice my signature. They have the script notes. They have the check stub for the bribe. They have the temporary guardianship petition you were going to use to steal her baby." Sabrina's head snapped up. "What? What guardianship?" "He was going to have you declared unfit and take Ivy," I said, my eyes locked on Troy. "That was the endgame, wasn't it?" Troy's face, which had been red with anger, drained of all color. He looked from me to Sabrina. He saw the evidence on the table. He saw the open betrayal on her face, and the last of his cheap legal bluster evaporated, replaced by pure physical menace. He took a step, not toward the door, toward me. "You," he hissed, his hand balling into a fist. "You interfering." He took another step. That was the trigger. I didn't flinch. I just stood up, my chair scraping loudly on the floor. And I opened the front door. Detective Yara Penn was standing on the porch. Her hand was already raised to knock. She wasn't in uniform. She was in a plain black jacket, a badge on her belt. She had been listening by prior arranged consent to the entire conversation. "Mr. Maddox," she said, her voice impossibly calm. "I believe you were just pivoting to menace. We call that intimidation of a witness." Troy stopped. He physically recoiled, his whole body deflating as if he'd been punctured. His face went from white to a sickly gray. Detective Penn stepped inside. And she wasn't alone. Another plainclothes officer was behind her. "Troy Maddox, this is a warrant," she said, holding up the paper. "It's for all electronic devices registered to you, your home address, and your business. Maddox Auto Title. We've already executed it at your shop." The IP trace on the fraudulent filing was all the probable cause we needed. Troy was silent. He was looking at the warrant, at the cops, at me. He was calculating. But for the first time, he had no moves left. And that's when Sabrina broke. The final thread didn't just snap, it disintegrated. She saw him powerless. She saw the police. She saw the guardianship papers that I had mentioned. She saw the abyss he had dug for her, and she clawed her way out. "He told me to," she shrieked, the sound tearing through the house. She was on her feet, pointing at him, her entire body shaking with a different kind of rage. The rage of the truly, finally betrayed. "He told me you'd never notice. ISA, he said, you were too busy, too important in Austin. He said you'd feel guilty. He said the baby would make you back down." Troy's head snapped toward her. "Sabrina, shut your mouth. Shut your..." "No," she screamed. "You said it was just paperwork. You said it was to fix the house. You told me to trace her name. You said to use the stamp. You said it didn't matter if it was expired. You said, she stopped, choking on a sob. The confession pouring out of her, unstoppable. Detective Penn just stood, watching, letting her go. Then Sabrina looked at me, her eyes wild, begging for the lifeline I had offered. I forged her name, she said, the words now clear, sharp, and devastating. I forged her name because he said it's just family. He said that's what family does. They just sign. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at the kitchen table, at my father's old dictation machine. The small red light was still on. The tape was still turning silently, capturing the line that no one in this room, or in a courtroom, would ever be able to unhear. Detective Penn didn't move. She just looked at Sabrina, then at the dictation recorder on the table, its small red light still glowing. Thank you, Ms. Cole. I believe that's what we call a full admission. The house, which had been a stage for so many lies, was now a crime scene. The entire dynamic had inverted. Troy, who had burst in with such toxic confidence, was now silent, his face a mask of waxy disbelief. He had been outmaneuvered not by a legal argument, but by a $9 cassette tape, and his own partner's terror. Isa Miller, Detective Penn said, turning to me. That recorder is now evidence. I'll need to take it. Of course, I said. I pressed the stop button. The loud mechanical clunk was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Detective Penn began her work with a chilling, dispassionate efficiency. She didn't just collect Troy's laptop, which he had left on the sagging porch in his rage. She bagged the dictation recorder, and then she turned to Sabrina. Ms. Cole, you mentioned Mr. Maddox told you to trace the signature. You mentioned receipts. Where are they? Sabrina, now a cooperating witness, was a completely different person. The fight was gone, replaced by a desperate, hurried compliance. She walked as if in a trance to the plastic file box. She didn't retrieve the guardianship papers, those I had buried. She pulled out the manila folder with the tracing paper, the practice sheets, and then she dug deeper, past the script notes, and pulled out a small, crumpled stack of receipts. He paid Jenna, she whispered, handing them to the detective. And he kept all the receipts for the notary. Pauline. He said he needed them to prove she'd pay him back for the fees. He was building a paper trail to blackmail his own co-conspirators. Detective Penn took them, her face impassive, sliding each one into its own clear plastic bag. Chain of custody logged, she said to the other officer. As if summoned by the legal chaos, a new car pulled up. A very expensive, very black sedan. Cliff Knoll, the managing broker from Hearth, got out. He was not alone. A man who radiated expensive attorney energy, carrying a polished leather briefcase, was with him. Cliff saw the police car, the officers, and me standing on the porch. He looked like he was going to be physically ill. He and his lawyer marched up the walkway. Detective, his attorney said, all professional courtesy. We are here on behalf of Mr. Knoll and Hearth, my clients, he gestured to Cliff. We are just made aware of the gross misrepresentations made by Mr. Maddox and Mr. Cole. We are here to offer our full cooperation. We will be withdrawing all filings immediately and conducting a full internal report. Leia, who had arrived just moments behind them as planned, stepped forward. She was, as always, a blade. An internal report, she said, her voice cutting through the humid air. That's a public relations strategy, counselor, not a legal remedy. Your internal report won't satisfy the state. Cliff paled. We will report it internally. You will, Leia interrupted. Walk back to your car. Call the state licensing board now and self-report Ms. Vale and your own brokerage for gross negligence and potential conspiracy. You will do it before Detective Penn adds your name to her warrant for obstruction, won't you? The lawyer looked at Leia, at the detective, and at his client's white-knuckled grip on his own briefcase. He knew. Cliff, the lawyer said, his voice tight. Make the call. As Cliff fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. Another car pulled up. Nate Rios. He wasn't in his office clothes, he was in a polo shirt, but he was holding a large certified envelope. ISA, he said, handing the packet to my attorney. It's the full findings from the notary misconduct report. The state's investigator just emailed it. It's worse than we thought. Pauline's commission lapse wasn't just an oversight. She's got 4, not 2, 4 prior flags for acknowledgement fraud. And all 4 of them going back 2 years were on deals filed by one agent, Maddox's auto title. He had been using her as a private rubber stamp for his dirty deals all over the county. This wasn't a one-off theft, it was a criminal enterprise. Leia took the report. Thank you, Nate. This closes the loop. This is what we needed for the final order. She looked at me. It's time. Back to the courthouse. We were back in hearing room 3B by 2 p.m. It was Saturday, a day the courthouse was usually closed, but Judge Keller had reconvened on an emergency basis. The air was thick with a sense of finality. This time, the room was fuller. Detective Penn was present. Nate was present. Cliff Knoll and his attorney were present, looking shattered. And Sabrina was there, sitting with her public defender. No longer a combatant, just a defendant. Troy Maddox was also present. He was in the custody of the deputy, his hands cuffed in front of him. His cheap blazer was gone, his smugness replaced by a flat, dead-eyed stare. He had said nothing since his arrest. The court is reconvened, Judge Keller said, his voice a low rumble. Ms. Voss, I have your motion to void and a report from Detective Penn. The floor is yours. Leia stood. Your Honor, in light of the full confession of the respondent, Ms. Cole, and the arrest of Mr. Maddox on charges of forgery and conspiracy, we are moving for an immediate and final order. We move to declare all fraudulent filings, specifically the power of attorney, the transfer repair easement, and all related instruments, null and void *ab initio *, from the beginning. Furthermore, she continued, we move for the court to direct the county recorder to index this voiding order ahead of any potential conveyance attempts that may have been filed by other parties in this conspiracy. We need to ensure the chain of title is not just cleared, but sealed. This was the critical part, ensuring no other part of Troy's network could try to push a sale through. Finally, we request a permanent protective order entered against Mr. Troy Maddox, preventing any and all contact, communication, or inducement toward Ms. Isa Miller, Ms. Eileen Miller, and Ms. Sabrina Cole. Judge Keller looked at Sabrina's lawyer. Counselor, the young lawyer said, standing, his papers rattling. My client is here in good faith. She is cooperating fully with the district attorney's office. She wishes to make a statement to the court, if permitted. Judge Keller looked at Sabrina. Ms. Cole, be brief. Sabrina stood. She was shaking, but her eyes were clear. The tears were gone. The performance was gone. There was just this terrible, hollowed-out clarity. I let him talk me into it, she said, her voice quiet, but carrying in the silent room. Troy, he said it was just a short-term sale. He said we could buy it back later after we flipped it, and we'd give Ivy her share then. He said it was the only way to get the money we needed for Ivy. She took a shaky breath, then looked at me. But I knew, she whispered. I knew Ivy would never consent. I knew she loved the house. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway. I signed the POA paper. I traced her name. I'm sorry, ISA. I'll pay back the money, the $5,000. I'll get a job. It was the first true thing she had said to me in a decade. Judge Keller stared at her for a long, hard moment. He picked up his stapler, that substitute gavel, and set it down. The order is signed, he declared. All fraudulent instruments are null. The recorder is so directed. The protective order is granted. Mr. Maddox will have no contact with any member of this family. Period. He then looked at the deputy. Mr. Maddox, you are remanded on charges of forgery, filing false instruments, and conspiracy to commit notary fraud. Your protest, he said as Troy started to mutter, is noted, and it is irrelevant. The deputy pulled Troy to his feet. You can't do this. Troy snarled, his voice finally returning. It was her. She did it all. It's a family misunderstanding. His protest was drowned out by the sharp, metallic clink of the steel as the deputy tightened the cuffs for transport. The sound echoed in the beige room. A clean, final punctuation. Judge Keller then turned to Sabrina. Ms. Cole, your confession, your cooperation, and your sister's request have been noted. The criminal charges are not dismissed. However, in coordination with the district attorney, you are being referred to the court's pretrial diversion program. This is conditional. It is conditioned on your full and continued cooperation. It is conditioned on you seeking and maintaining employment, and it is conditioned on your full and total restitution of the $5,000 stolen from the escrow account. The court, he finished, will set a compliance review in 6 months. Do not make me regret this, counselor. Do not make her sister regret this. Thank you, Your Honor, her lawyer whispered. We are done, Keller said. He looked at me. Ms. Miller, anything else? I stood up. I looked at the judge, at my sister, at the door Troy had just been dragged through. Yes, Your Honor. Just one last addition to the record. Title is clean. Locks will change today. Judge Keller nodded, a ghost of a smile on his tired face. Paper protects, Ms. Miller. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the flat gray sky had finally broken. A hard, cleansing rain was washing the sidewalks of Maple Hollow. It was cold, and it felt incredible. I stepped right out into it, turning my face up, letting the water wash the stale air of the courtroom, the house, the lies off of me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Leia, who had stayed behind to file the final signed order. It was 3 words, asterisk recorded, filed, index. Asterisk. It was done. The title was clean. The paper was absolute. I walked past the dripping news reporters, who had already gotten their story of Troy's arrest. I didn't stop at my rental car. I walked straight to the curb where a white van was waiting, just as I had scheduled. The logo on the side read Maple Hollow Mobile Locksmith. The man rolled down his window. Ms. Miller, you're all set. The old ones are drilled out. Keypad is disabled. Here's the new set. He pressed a newly cut, shining brass key into my palm. It was solid. It was heavy. It was an end, not a beginning. I drove back to the house one last time. It was dusk. The rain had softened to a drizzle. Sabrina's beat-up old car was gone. Her 48 hours had been reduced to 2 by her own choice. I saw a car parked across the street, Mrs. Alder's car. She got out, holding a bundled, sleeping Ivy, and just stood on the sidewalk, giving me space. The baby's quiet, soft coo carried across the damp air. Safe? I walked up the sagging porch steps. The old, sticky knob was gone. The keypad was gone. In their place was a heavy, industrial, beautiful new deadbolt. I put the bag with the TRO and the voiding order down on the step. I put the new key in the lock. It didn't stick. It didn't fight me. It turned smooth as silk with a heavy, satisfying thunk. I pushed the door open, scraping it over the warped floor one last time. I stood at the threshold, looking into the dark, empty house. It didn't smell like mildew or betrayal anymore. It just smelled like an old, empty house, a neutral asset, a line item. I stepped back, pulled the door shut, and turned the new key. The deadbolt engaged with a sound like a bank vault closing. I picked up my bag. I walked down the steps, past the porch, and didn't look back. I knew with an absolute certainty that settled into my bones that the ledger at last was balanced.